Welcome to Feminist Question Time today on the 1st of May. Feminist Question Time is brought to you by Women's Human Rights Campaign, which is the leading global organisation speaking on women's sex-based rights. Our main focus is on defending women's sex-based rights against the threats posed by gender identity ideology. We have a website, womensdeclaration.com, where you can find our declaration on women's sex-based rights, which has been signed by 17,004 people from 132 countries and is supported by 338 organisations. This week, I'm delighted to welcome panellists Mariam Forstater from the UK, who was fired for saying sex is real, and from a newly formed organisation, Sex Matters, which she'll hopefully tell us about. Graziella Florimond from French Guiana, she's a writer and teacher. Zhu from Singapore, working professional lesbian. Susan Nyabena from Kenya, she's founder of Gender Inc. and youth activist and blogger. And also Mariam Low from Georgia, who's a feminist researcher. We're going to hear from Maya. Can you tell us about what your court case is and why it's important to the women all over the world? Why does it matter in terms of gender identity ideology?
My case is a discrimination case under the Equality Act 2010 in the UK, which applies to people in work and as volunteers and as users of services. So mine's a test case about me in employment, but it has implications for women across the UK, mainly women and men, but it's mainly women who feel strongly about this. Losing work, being discriminated in work, being harassed and victimized at work, and being thrown off social media platforms and thrown out of associations and so on. So legally, my case has implications in the UK. But hopefully what happens in the UK will also help what happens in other countries. It supports freedom of association of women in the UK to talk about this stuff and to have the freedom of speech to be able to talk about the conflict of rights between sex and gender identity ideology. And if we can do that in the UK, then hopefully that can help other people around the world.
The judge initially said that the belief in biological sex was not worthy of respect in a democratic society. Can you tell us what that means?
Yeah. So the discrimination case that I brought is about discrimination on the basis of religion or belief. That's the characteristic. You shouldn't lose your job for being a Christian. You shouldn't lose your job for being a Muslim. You shouldn't lose your job for being an atheist. But it also includes non-religious beliefs or philosophies. And because non-religious beliefs don't have the institutional sort of brand name of a religion, they have to have a set of criteria to decide what is a non-religious philosophy that should have the same kind of protection as religion. And the protection that it has is not that your religion has dominance over other people's religion or over other people's rights, but just that people shouldn't be discriminated against because of their belief or their lack of belief. And so there's a set of criteria for a non-religious belief to qualify, which comes from this case called Granger. So it's the Granger criteria, and it's that the belief has to be genuinely held, coherent, important, and about a weighty aspect of your life. So it's like a definition of a belief that is like a religion in that it affects your life. So sort of a belief in string theory probably doesn't count because string theory, isn't going to affect your life, whereas a belief in sex does. And then this final criteria that it has to be not inconsistent with other people's human rights and therefore worthy of respect in a democratic society. And that was the one that in my original tribunal was failed on. It was said that this belief was not worthy of respect in a democratic society. And so that's what we were challenging. And the sort of big legal arguments were that that bar is set very low, because when you're saying that someone shouldn't be discriminated against for their religion, you're not judging the validity of that religion, you're not judging the ethics of that religion. All you're saying is they have a religion, it's important to them, they shouldn't be discriminated against because of it. And so the protection for non-religious belief should be similar. You know, like things should be treated alike. And so that bar should be very low. And the kinds of things that have failed that test in other cases are things like Holocaust denial and a belief that you should overthrow the government by violent revolution. You know, so things that are really not worthy of respect.
So if we lose this case, or if you lose this case, we're going to be on a par with that. So
right. Well, I mean, that's what. So when I lost the case in the first instance, that's what they were saying, and that's what we're challenging. And so we think that's, you know, a pretty strong legal point. And there was quite a lot of discussion about this thing about it's about Article 9 and 10 of the Human Rights Act and the European Convention on Human Rights, which is freedom of speech and freedom of belief, and how they interact with Article 17, which is the one that says none of your rights should be used to take away other people's rights. And so it's the question of your freedom of speech should only be constrained when you're like shouting fire in a crowded theatre, and in the workplace, how much freedom of speech should you have? And clearly in practice in the workplace, you don't have freedom of speech. You know, if you work for Tesco, you're not allowed to go into work and say Sainsbury's is better. You know, you have to say have a nice day. You have to, there's lots of things that you don't have freedom to do at work, but can your employer say you have to say trans women are women? That's the question. Can they require that you either profess to hold a belief that you don't hold, or that they can discriminate against you for a belief that you do hold in sex?
And Maya, I understand that some rather sort of larger institutions or bodies have now supported your case in court. Could you tell us about that? Because
yes.
I found that quite encouraging. I think a little sign of the tide turning, perhaps.
Absolutely. So this was, so the Index on Censorship, which is the NGO that campaigns for freedom of speech, they've been in on the case since quite early on. They requested permission to intervene on the basis of freedom of speech, and they did that, and that was great. But then also surprisingly, quite late in the day, so early in April, the Equality and Human Rights Commission, which is the government's equality body, so their job is to look after everybody's rights and equality, and they've been missing in action on this topic and supportive of gender ideology and not of women, said they wanted to come in, they wanted to intervene, which was a surprise. And initially the judge said no, because it was so late and we only had a day and a half, and it would you know, add to just the time. And then a couple of weeks later, the judge changed his mind and he said yes. So he extended it to 2 days, and the Equality and Human Rights Commission intervened. And what they said was, we had lots of arguments. We had arguments about the definition of sex and what the extent of the Gender Recognition Act on private civilians. And they didn't come in on any of that. They came in on one quite narrowly defined piece, which was that in the original judgment, the judge confused the belief and the manifestation of the belief. So he said that, so what should happen is the judge says the belief is protected. That was the preliminary hearing. And then the next stage is we go back to the employment tribunal and it says, what happened? How did I lose my job? What was it that my employer required of me? How did I act? Were they acting reasonably, or was I acting reasonably? The sort of facts of the manifestation. And the judge conflated the two. So he said that my belief means that I will necessarily misgender and harass somebody in the workplace, and that I will make the workplace a hostile environment, and therefore I shouldn't have any protection. Without any, there's no evidence that I mean, I didn't do that. And I said from the very outset that I would use preferred pronouns. And so the thing that the Equality and Human Rights Commission came in on was just that question, saying, if you put the manifestation aside and you just look at the belief, is it protected? And they said, in their opinion, it is, because, as I said at the beginning, it's a parallel to a religion. And the bar for a religion to be protected is very low. You don't have to judge the validity. You don't have to, you know, it's a very low bar. And so the Equality and Human Rights Commission said, and they were quite careful to sort of distance themselves and say, we're not saying we agree with her, but we're saying she should have the right to hold this belief and not be discriminated against. So that was big.
And that's really encouraging, and it's great your case came up, and I understand we'll hear in the next 2 months the outcome, and most people are reasonably positive, which we'll just continue to keep our fingers crossed. I would also, could you tell us about Sex Matters? You've started an organisation with some other fantastic activists, so that's it's sex. Is it
-matters.org,
which is a great organisation. So if you tell us a bit about it.
Yes, and if you were following at all, Sex Matters live tweeted the tribunal, and they, those are all collected in threads. So it's quite, if you want to catch up on what happened, have a look at sexmatters.org Twitter. So Sex Matters is a new organisation that I set up with Naomi Cunningham and Rebecca Bull, 2 lawyers, and Emma Hilton, a scientist, with the aim of clarifying the meaning of sex in law, policy, and culture in the UK. So we're focused on law. So we're focused in the UK across every sector. So education, employment, sport, everywhere that sex matters. We want to clarify that it's sex that matters, not gender identity, and use that to enable people to protect their rights at work and as service users, and the right to freedom of association. Because we think the Equality Act is pretty decent. It protects people from discrimination based on gender reassignment, and it protects based on sex. And if we can clarify that, and if we can use that, and if we can get organizations to see that they've been misadvised about what the law requires of them, there's a lot that can be done without necessarily needing change, but just using the laws that we've got. And so that's what we want to do, to sort of meet Stonewall where they are. So Stonewall's the organization that's kind of captured, they cover 25% of the UK workforce in terms of advising and telling employers what to do. And that's mainly public sector, charity, big corporate employers. So kind of meeting Stonewall where they are, giving those organizations guidance that is credible and allows them to say, we're not going to do what Stonewall tell us to do.
I think it's such a brilliant development, Sex Matters. And what I know of, I know a few teachers who've been following your case and really, really concerned about it, because it's going to influence what people in all sorts of institutions can talk about. But I think also Sex Matters sounds as if it will be able to get taken up, and those materials will be used in institutions to find a way forward on this, and particularly with your legal expertise, yours and your lawyer, but your experience.
Yes.
So it's I think it's going to be a brilliant way forward.
Yeah. And we want to be a sort of we haven't set it up as a overtly feminist organization. It's not political. It's kind of the lowest common denominator that we need to be able to have language and be able to talk about this. And then, whether people are coming into it because they're concerned about sport, or because they're concerned about feminism, or because they're concerned about child safeguarding or freedom of speech, everybody, or religious freedoms, everybody needs to have this basic ability to talk about sex clearly, and then people can take it in whichever direction they, is most concerning to them. On my website, which is highermaya.net, there are links to all of the legal documents. So the arguments from my side, the arguments from the other side, and from the Equality and Human Rights Commission and Index on Censorship. And they're a really good resource for people that, already want to see what the legal arguments are.
We're now going to go to Zhu. Zhu's from Singapore and she's a working professional lesbian. She's going to share her screen because her room is really messy. And she's going to talk to us about the similar thing, the situation of gender identity in Singapore, Zhu's country. And when did you realize it was a threat? So over to you, Zhu.
All right, let's get down to it. I'll just put down some basic facts about Singapore. We are island city. I promise this is more or less relevant. We are an island city state of approximately 5.8 people. We are mostly Chinese, with the rest of the ethnic groups being Malays, Indians, and others. We are very small. We are only about 728 km squared, which is 281 square miles. It's a lot smaller than literally everything. Most of our population stay in public housing, also known as HDBs. And we have national service, which is compulsory for males aged 16.5 years. They serve for 2 years in either Army, Navy, Police, or Civil Defense. So I think on to the topic, gender identity in Singapore. For Singapore, if you want to change your legal name, it's pretty simple. Anyone can do it. It's about $50 to $150 depending on where you go to get it done. But if you were to change your legal gender marker, it's slightly more complicated. You will need a medical examination report form for change of sex directly from ICA, which is the Immigration Checkpoint Authority. It is not available online. And this form must be signed by either an endocrinologist, gynecologist, urologist, or plastic surgeon, confirming that they have examined you and that you have completely changed your genitalia from one sex to the other. So this is something that before you can change your legal marker, your birth certificate cannot be changed though. Only what we call our IC, identity card, passport, and all the other legal forms. So in Singapore, we are pretty much by the book. As long as you have everything in order, you're good to go. Marriage is defined as something between a man and a woman. But if you take note of what I just said, if you had changed your gender marker, you can marry your opposite sex partner, which is kind of sad sometimes because there has been a few people who transition in order to marry their partner, whatever lesbians or gay people. Sometimes they do transition in order to get married in Singapore. So in Singapore generally, when someone thinks of transgender issues, there's two main camps. Most would be the older generation, which the older generation would say, oh, is it transgender like Kuma? Kuma is a popular drag queen who performed in many venues, and he was also on television shows as well. He recently came out as gay in 2019, and I think he's still performing. But amongst the younger crowd, if you say something about transgender, it was very similar to what you hear about in the West. So there's two things I want to talk about, which is in January 2021, which is earlier this year, this post by this trans-identified male student who wants to be known as Ashley. He posted on Reddit claiming that MOE, which is the Ministry of Education, had intervened in hormone treatment, even though that apparently he had parental consent to seek treatment and agreement with the doctor that he could start hormone therapy. Basically, the school does not allow Ashley to have long hair and must conform to the male dress codes, which is pants and a uniform top. The female dress codes for majority of our schools are skirt and a top. This is quite straightforward. So when Ashley posted on Reddit, there was quite a lot of support, mostly from the younger crowd. And following this post, there was a protest outside the Ministry of Education. It was about 3 to 5 people. And of these 3 to 5 people, 3 were arrested, mainly because they were only ones still there when the police came. You can't protest in Singapore without a license. So that is one quite very recent incident. Because of this, there was quite a lot of talking points exposed. This incident was actually made its way up to the parliament in Singapore, where our government basically said, let's not import outside cultural issues into Singapore. We are conservative Asians, etc., etc. This is quite par for the course for our government. So there's that. In Singapore, I went to research this, and there's quite a lot of transgender organizations. I found about 8 so far, and if you ask me, is there any that is just for lesbians, I think there's 1, and I'm not sure if they're still operating. and because of that, Singapore, like if you remember, we are only about 4 or 5 million people, and there's a lot of organizations for them. The main people who oppose this are mainly the older generation, who tend to be more conservative on a lot of things. The older generation also does not really support gay lesbian matters, or even things, depending on where they're from, sometimes they will not support quite a lot of things. And a lot of the LGBT organizations that we have are actually closely affiliated with the transgender community, and outside of private groups online, such as Discord or other groups, I find it quite hard to find an organization that is solely focused on just LGBT issues.
So what affects women's lives in general in your country, and where does your government stand in terms of women's rights?
This is quite a broad topic. I've picked 3 to talk about. So in Singapore, we are pretty much a mixed bag. We have some good things. We have 4 months paid maternity leave. This is, you are entitled to it. A part of it is paid by your employer, part of it is paid by government. The more children you have, the more higher the ratio of government paying for your maternity leave. Marital rape has been criminalized as of 2020. That is just last year, but it's a step forward. And there's actually quite a high ratio of women to men in our local universities. So there's quite a lot of things. I thought I'd talk about some lesser known issues about Singapore that are more unique to Singapore. So 80% of our population stays in HDB, also known as public housing. They are large apartment-sized buildings that range from 1-bedroom studio to multi-generation 5-bedroom. The prices range from $200,000 to $1 million. And the other 20% usually stay in condominiums or landed property. So because it's public housing, the government controls who and how can purchase this. And the most common and usually the only way to get your own HDB flat is to get married, and then you can apply for one. So this is pretty much, there's also other ways to get, but they tend to be sad because it means you have been orphaned quite recently. So the other most common way is to wait until you're 35 years old, then apply for a singles flat. So that means that if you're an unmarried individual, for reasons up to you, you're gay, you're lesbian, you just never found someone to settle down with, you will be staying with your parents until you're 35. And those who are able to move out will usually rent a room somewhere, shared with multiple people, or have lucrative careers that enable them to purchase private accommodation. So now we know that Singapore has not much space and all that, and Singapore has a very pro-family stance, which means in order to have the luxury of not seeing your parents, to be married, and when you are married, you are expected to birth as many children as you're able to. The government gives a substantial amount of subsidies to families with children, and single mothers usually do not get subsidies. So in this case, the rights that you have comes with strings attached for this, that your own space is there only if you do your part for the family. If you're single and lesbian, you will never be able to get your place unless you turn 35 and hope your bank has enough for you to pay a singles flat. This is a bit different from what I think most other people are for, but the ability to actually stay on your own is quite something that you don't really think about until you do. And something that's pretty much, I feel, unique to Singapore. Another topic that I wanted to touch on was that there has been quite a number of molestation cases or just general sexual assault cases, and the hands-off attitude that the authorities seem to be taking. So one recent example is of Terence Xiao Kai Yuan. He's a 23-year-old uni student who molested a 28-year-old woman on the MRT. The MRT is our public transport train. About 3 million people use it. This guy tried to run, and he was sentenced to 21 months supervised probation, as the judge said that he has the potential to excel. This guy sexually assaulted a woman, was caught, and he was not given jail time because he had put into Excel. There was a huge public uproar, and the sentence was changed to 2 weeks jail time. Another similar case is Joel Rasis Ismail. He's a 27-year-old student as well who took videos of female students showering on campus. He was sentenced to 12 months jail and a 1.5K fine, as well as Nicholas Lim, who failed a female student in the shower. He was given 12 months conditional warning as he was assessed to have a high likelihood of rehabilitation and was remorseful. This was pretty much a joke as people started saying, oh yeah, if you want to molest someone, make sure you have a straight A's, then you get off easily. So this was something that was quite a buzz in the online world. And the last thing I want to touch about on this topic is that FGM is female genital mutilation. It's still practiced in Singapore, albeit within the Malay Muslim community. Not many people know of this, and a lot of women who this were done to actually were not aware that they had been cut. And this practice was actually done by doctors who did not learn the procedure in medical school, but had the techniques passed down to them by other doctors. So this FGM was not many people have even heard of it, and like I said, not many people even know of it. And I would like to bring more awareness to this case.
If you're part of a feminist organisation, can you tell us about it, how it started, recent achievements, and also tell us about other women's rights or LGB groups working in your country?
I'm not really part of any organization. I'm just, like I say, I'm a working professional who happens to be a lesbian. I'll never get married here. I'll never have a house. And that's how I am. But we do have quite a lot of women's rights groups. The most well-known one would be AWARE. They're the Association for Women for Action and Research. They are, if they're the most well-known, as in if you ask someone in Singapore, hey, what are women's rights? They'll say, oh, is that AWARE group. The AWARE also runs a few other things. They have a sexual assault care center, a women's helpline, legal clinic, counseling support groups. Some other groups that I know of is Casa Rautha. I personally donate to them. They are a domestic abuse shelter, which is always something you need in everyone. There's also UWS, which is United Women Singapore. They have initiatives for girls to take up careers in STEM. Then SWCO, which is Singapore Council of Women's Organizations, they have this interesting thing, which is Seeds of Change, which is a new fund to support women's organizations to pilot or scale up women's development projects. They are interesting because they are supported by the Ministry of Social and Family Development Office for Women Development. It's a bit of a mouthful, I don't know why. Other things we have, oh, I forgot to put it in, Daughters of Tomorrow. They support low-income women towards gainful employment, and we have a few more that I think I ran out of space. So all of them are doing pretty much quite great work. Some of the notable advancement would be, like I said earlier, would be the criminalization of marital rape in 2020. Previously, also, the definition of rape is only if a penis is entered forcibly into a vagina. Now it has expanded to more definitions. And there's also a white paper which is to be issued by the government sometime this year. It was run by R.K. Shanmugam, and they are actually being quite proactive. They have held sessions where they consolidate feedback and recommendations between women in the private and public sectors, and they're actually led by all-female leaders. They are led by the Minister of State for Social and Family Development, Sun Xueling, Minister of State for Culture, Community and Youth, Low Yen Ling, and Parliamentary Secretary for Health, Rahayu Masam. This is quite a step forward because the Singapore government tends to be quite a boys' club, and I'm honestly a bit surprised I managed to find 3 women who managed to do it. Other than that, for LGB organizations, a lot of them have trans rights activism somewhere in the background, and I cannot really think of any that don't, other than, like I said, private groups that exist on mostly Discord or other spaces online.
Now we're going to hear from Susan Nyabena. She's from Kenya. She's founder of Gender Inc. And is a youth activist and blogger. We've heard from some women that if you're in a women's rights organization in Africa, so we heard from a woman in Nigeria recently, and she was saying that there's a bit of pressure from international funders that if you're a women's rights organization, that you should now start to accept this, that their new definition of women as being anybody who thinks they're a woman. Do you think that's happening at all in Kenya?
Oh yes, it is actually, and I would say the pressure do come with the donor funds, you know, especially maybe NGOs and CBOs that are trying to, you know, fight or have the rights of women, the vulnerable, be recognized. There is always a catch to it. It's like, okay, if you're funding you have to have a segment for the LGBTQI community. Now, the issue is, as much as the organizations would want maybe some of them to support the LGBTQI community, when you register your organization, the government is not going to register you as an LGBTQI organization, because to them, if we are putting it on a legal aspect, that is how, if you're supposed to register your organization legally, that those particular, you know, if you're, let's say if you're a CBO, community-based organization, you need to state your jurisdiction, you need to, you know, be specific with your target audience. So when you talk about your target audience being LGBTQI, there is nowhere in our legal framework that talks about LGBTQI. So basically it becomes null and void. So maybe some of them, what they do, they will do have the funds. They will not like categorically state that this is what they're going to do with it. So maybe when they're doing implementation, let's say if they're having workshops or trainings, they will have members or groups of LGBTQI community attending the sessions. And, you know, they will have this participant form signing and things like that, or they will do a recording. So they'll be able to send back a report. But on a legal aspect, no. And they do, you know, if let's say you get caught, let me put in quote unquote, by the police, either if you come out and say, you know, either I'm part of LGBTQI or I'm trying to fight for the gender identity issue and stuff, you can be prosecuted. It is stated in our penal code, it is stated in the Constitution. So it is not something that people just come out and talk about it. But in 2019, there was a campaign. They actually wanted to be recognized, like the gender identity, the all aspect of sexual orientation, and actually have gender identity and sexual orientation defined in our legal documents. So they pushed through it. They had campaigns, they had protests, but the final verdict by the judge, he said that gender identity or sexual orientation is a non-issue to Kenyan, especially that we are African. Our cultures do not recognize or do not relate to anything regarding sexual orientation. So it flopped, and they were taken aback. So there are rumors that they're saying they're still coming back, that they're going to appeal, but that is yet to be seen, like what they're doing.
Yeah, so I mean, that's really interesting. And it sounds as if very much the international NGOs or community-based organizations, the funders are sort of trying to be progressive in terms of lesbian and gay work, and then joining it together or conflating it with the trans, the gender identity, which that's what we're, Women's Human Rights Campaign, are worried about, that joining together. So we're very positive about people being lesbian and gay and bisexual, but we're more concerned about the problems with men saying that they're women and then being able to get into women's shelters and get, you know, be elected as women. But can we go on to the next question, which is, what affects women's lives in general in your country, and what's your government, the government of Kenya, like on women's rights issues?
Okay, from what you said, I think I might have maybe missed on that, or maybe did not talk about that, because men cannot actually come out and, you know, say that they feel, or they are women and they're able to get those services. No, it's not allowed. We don't even have gender neutral washrooms or services or public amenities. It's either you're male or you're female. And for those male who say they feel like within they are female, they actually get discriminated upon. Sometimes, you know, there are issues of rape, there are issues of being, you know, physically harassed and situations like that. So everybody is scared to come out. So yeah. It's like, basically it's a silent issue.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, and then on women's issues, yeah.
Yes, on women's issues, being Africa, our first issue is cultural. Zoom has actually talked about FGM. It's something that has been there with us for a long time. And in 2011, we actually managed to have an act that criminalized the practicing of FGM. But later, I think a year or two after, there is a lady, a doctor actually, she came and she said that it is not right. We are infringing the rights of those people who enjoy or respect or admire the FGM. So when the government criminalizes FGM, we are trying to infringe the rights of those people who actually identify themselves by going through the act. So she wanted that FGM be put for people who are from 18. So basically, you know, for our country, the adult age is like when you're 18, you're an adult. So she said that the FGM practice should be put at the age of 18. So if you're 18, you can decide if you want to undergo FGM or not. So basically, it's like it turned the whole issue around, and it was interesting considering that it was being championed by a woman. And yet we say that FGM is actually fueled by patriarchy. So that was really a setback for us. But then again, as much as the act was put there and they tried to encourage whistleblowers, so we could be able to, you know, the government would know when the incidences are happening, because it's like a cultural ceremony. You know, they will plan for it, they will have gatherings and people will be dancing and enjoying. So they find a new way. So it's like FGM got medicalized. So they would do it in town. They wouldn't even have to travel to their villages. They would just do it in town. They have nurses and doctors who help with that. So they're saying that since they say the cultural part, when you go to the village, the ones who do the act, you know, they're not maybe aware, or they're not well trained. They don't consider the hygiene part. So if they use the doctors and the nurses, then it means they consider all the aspect of medicine and ensure that it is safe. And so we had quite a success after the act came in, but now when we started medicalizing it, we went a little bit low. So we also have issues of early marriages. It's still happening. And this also, we had another setback with it, because there's a time our parliament decided they want to reduce the consent age of sex to 16. It's at 18, so they want to reduce it to 16. So basically, when you're 16, you can decide if you can consent to sex. Bringing it down to 16, consenting into sex also encourages early marriages. So, you know, with teenagers and the emotions and hormones, definitely you might be in love, you know, so to say. And before you realize, we actually have an increase in teenage pregnancies. And the issue was, if we just allow them, you know, to reduce the consent age, so they'll be able to enjoy and be free with whatever they want to do. But it is not the case, because we are yet to even have comprehensive sexual education in our curriculum. So it beats the logic that you cannot have comprehensive sexual education in the curriculum, yet you want to reduce the age of consent. So what are they going to be doing if they do not have any knowledge on how to, you know, handle the issues, the whole issues of sexual and reproductive health? And then we have issues of, child prostitution that actually, it's like, it's like a silent, not really a silent issue, but it is not really so much investigated because it's done by cartels. So anybody who is trying to get information or, you know, bring to light the perpetrators, they either they vanish, or we just don't hear from them anymore. And we had a case of a particular social worker who was really championing for the rights of the children, because, you know, they get what will happen, let's say you're in Nairobi, they would kidnap your daughter from Nairobi, and then where they will take her for child prostitution is like on the western side of Kenya, or maybe towards, you know, Ugandan side. So it's not basically that it will be within the city, and then they will take children from the other side of the country. So it is like let me just say, like they're moving the children around. So even before you start to think that, okay, this is the direction the child might go, basically you would look around where you live, but by that time the child is far gone. And when this social worker brought it to light, 2 days later, she was found dead. So everybody again shied off from the whole issue of championing for, you know, girls' rights, girls' education, you know, and things like that. So the other thing we do have, and right now that our major issue, I think this is what I would have started with, is gender-based violence. And with COVID-19, with the lockdown, people lost their jobs. We've struggled economically. I think everyone in the country has been affected. We have an increase of gender-based violence. And then it reached a point where it's like a gender war. It is like men versus women. Nobody's actually looking at gender-based violence as a violation of human rights and tackling it as a whole. We are like, it's either men or women. And there was one incident of a lady who apparently met a guy online, and they had a conversation, and she decided to meet the guy at his office. So it was like it was a tall building, I suppose, but they met at 12th floor. So whatever happened, whatever transpired, it's like all did not go well. So the guy pushed the lady out of the building from 12th floor. So, she got, thank God she's still alive. She got, medical care and everything. But in the end of the process, she's now a person living with disability. So there's a radio station, the host, they were men. So they decided to talk about this issue, and they just laughed about it. And they say, oh, women, why are you being so loose? Why are you being so cheap? You can play hard to get. It's not that you just go and see every man and look at her. She's now disabled. She cannot do any, it became a whole issue. And people on social media actually started a campaign that this radio hosts should lose their contract or their jobs. And which actually happened, and they lost their job. They're no longer in host to this radio station. But what later happened is that it shifted the attention from tackling the issues of gender-based violence to the issue of it is men versus women. So the men are saying, okay, women, if everything we do, you're going to be telling on us, you're going to be telling our bosses, then we are going to see how you live. It's like, women without us, you're always asking for money. And so it shifted the whole conversation. And this is actually, I would say it's a national pandemic. GBV is in Kenya. And that is just on the physical aspect. We have the issues of rape. We have the issues of cyberbullying, just to mention a few.
So we're now going to move to Mariam. She's a feminist researcher from Georgia. Thank you so much for being on, Mariam. Would you be able to tell us something about the situation with gender identity in your country? And how did you realize it was a threat to women and girls? And who's promoting or opposing it?
If I were to describe this country in terms of its politics, for example, I would say it's this very weird mix of conservative, because 80+% of the population is Orthodox Christian, 10% is Muslim, and the rest is just atheist or other religions. So we kind of have that going on. And then the people in my generation are a bit more progressive and, more into social causes like feminism, things like that. So oftentimes there's this conflict between these sides. And because of that, it kind of gets difficult to have any agreement. I think my generation is more into feminism because we've had this influence of the West on us, because we've grown up with all these Western ideas, shows, etc., more than the generations before us, and the internet and everything. So it's kind of made this impression on us, let's just say. But there is still a bit of our generation that is still a bit into the more conservative ideas, because of course there is.
Are people allowed to be lesbian or gay in Georgia?
Thing is, they are, but there's this whole thing of, again, conservative people are very against that, because a lot of them think it's some kind of mental issue. I know some people that actually think that. And again, in my generation, it's a bit less terrible, I guess, of a thing, a bit less looked down upon, a bit less of a thing that people will make fun of.
in Western Europe and the United States, and actually pretty much the whole of South America, the idea that men, if they decide they have a gender identity, they like wearing a dress or something, they're allowed to say that they're women, and that's now starting to be the law in our countries. But I guess your country is quite conservative, so maybe, is that happening or not?
There was this one law with, the discrimination, I think, where it stated in the purpose of the law that the protected groups were like sex, race, etc., and gender identity was in there. So I guess you could say it is getting there in the law, but we don't recognize change. Well, we generally don't accept changing the sex. But this month, we have had the first case of our public registry actually allowing a trans woman to change to a woman. And trans women generally have been a bit more active than trans men in that regard, demanding the change.
Wow, so it's starting to happen. And are you,
yes,
Mariam, are you in any feminist organizations, or, I mean, how did you become involved in, how did you hear about Women's Human Rights Campaign or gender identity, any of this?
Well, I'm frankly saying completely independent. Just happens to be, well, first off, happened to be on Reddit and saw all this stuff about, J.K. Rowling and all the feminist subreddits getting banned and everything, and then happened to then go into, well, Discord and other spaces where there were radical feminists, and that's how I started. And that was how I learned of this organization campaign, And when I came across, Women's Human Rights Campaign, I knew I just had to sign it, the declaration, I mean, because at that point I had seen enough things that were wrong with how women are treated worldwide. So that was how I joined.
Yeah, that's so amazing. It's fantastic. It's just brilliant with the internet that we can join together and we can link, even though it might be there aren't many people like you who in real life. So we're less alone. So quite a few of Women's Human Rights Campaign internationally are women they're the only one in their country. So
I am not sure if I would be the only one. It's just that I don't know many people because I'm generally an introvert, and this pandemic isn't helping it.
Yeah, absolutely. But so it is interesting that you've sort of thought things through, and it's based on your knowledge and understanding of the world. You're thinking this is a sort of sensible way of analysing it, this sort of gender critical position in favour of women's rights, and not accepting this.
Oh.
Yeah, well, you're doing.
So,
keep going.
Can I say?
Yeah.
I basically come from a country where gendered violence is still a huge problem. Yes, we've had some campaigns against it and everything, and some of those campaign ads have been attacking men for their masculinity and that expression of the violence against women, but I don't really think it has changed much. Maybe it's a bit more talked about, but people still don't do much if that happens.
Yeah. Do you have women's organizations in Georgia that are strong and work for women? Can you tell us about them at all?
Well, the sad thing is most of women's organizations have some form of trans rights activism going on. So I'm not sure if I could talk about them, because it kind of takes away from the issues that women face here, to be, protecting the trans people, because again, self-ID is dangerous, and the spaces that women have are very, very precious.
Yeah.
And
So-
for a country that also routinely looks down up on women, it's a very bad situation.
Do you have get drag on television?
I guess you could say we have situations where men in comedies, for example, dress up as women, but it's not purely drag in that sense. It just happens to be a male actor that dresses as a woman. There is nothing else to it.
Yeah.
And I remember when, you might remember Conchita. When he was popular, he was the laughing stock, let's just say, around here. And we don't exactly look at gay men or women that kindly. But we did make the movie called And Then We Danced, which is about a gay couple, well, or like a gay men's experiences, and there is another man he has some interaction with. And it's funny to think that the gay men were the first to get this kind of representation and not women,
Yeah.
Kind of tells how women are looked at. There is also the issue of surrogacy, since we are one of the few countries that actually have it legal. Understandably, we are one of the hotspots, just like Ukraine. There was this couple that wanted to use surrogacy to have as many children as possible. Neither of the couple were, citizens or native to this country. And sorry, but that is a huge violation of any rights women have.
We're going to now move on to Graziella Florimond. Graziella is from French Guinea. She's a writer and teacher.
No. French Guiana.
Hi, Graziella. So
Hi.
Can you please tell us something about the situation of gender identity in your country?
Okay, first, so my name is Graziella Florimond. I live in French Guiana. So French Guiana, in the first slide, is in South America between Suriname and Brazil. We have to respect the French law. And in 2018, I organized a march about sexist and sexual violence with the organization Nu Tout, but I don't want to work with them anymore because of gender identity issue. I realized and I discovered the problem with Margaret Stern. She published a thread, and this is not what she said, which made me realize the issue is the way French media and French leftist media react. And so what she said was not that extraordinary. She said, first, I don't want to work with the trans activists because they use too much stereotype to show femininity. Second, we don't have the same purpose. We want to fight against rape, against violence, against feminicide. You only want to talk about yourself. Three, she said, can you leave a lesbian alone, please? Who are you to make women guilty just because they say you know? And four, she explains that she creates something to show what happened in our country about feminicide. She's not the owner. She's very glad that women in France use that to talk about rape, to talk about feminicide. But if you use that to promote feminicide, turf au bûcher, that means burn turf, or to treat women, I don't want to talk with you anymore. And she ended by a slur. She said, I am a woman because I have a vagina. And that's it. But the French media talk only about this, the last thing in her thread. And each time I tried to say, excuse me, is it real about lesbian? Is it real about threat to death? For what? I live cancel culture. They cut my questions, they cut my comments, they cancel my account. So I have to find information in other way. And I find Meghan Murphy. I find what was happened in Canada. I find what was happened in USA about the Mitch Fest. There were the case of J.K. Rowling. So I discovered all that stuff, and I was a little bit horrified, a little bit worried. But I was thinking that in my country, it's not our problem, because that was only crazy English things in crazy English country with crazy English law, you know. And I was wrong, because it was already too late in France. I forget something. I forget that in 2014, in my country, in France, the Pope sent Christian in TV show, in radio show, and Christian was saying the French government, the French Minister of Education, want to teach to children that gender theory, that means boy to be a boy or to be a girl, it's not related to your body or your sex, it's related to feeling. And they were saying, you want to teach gender theory to children, do you want to teach that? And our former lovely president and our former lovely Minister of Education were saying in all media, there is no such a thing as gender theory in France. This is not existed. It's only fake news created by homophobic Christian and paranoid Christian. So I believe them, because it was very unbelievable. Sex does not exist, and be a boy is related to feelings. So I believe them at that time. Except that 2 years later, two sociologists, Juliette Wren and Gianfranco Rebucci, published a book, Encyclopedia of Critical Gender Theory. And in that book, they were explain gender theory. And in the beginning of this video, you can see the journalist asked them, so actually the Pope was right. Gender theory exists. And they admit, yes, it exists, but this is not the real name. The real name is critical gender theory. So I don't know if our president lied, or if he didn't know that Yograta principle exists. I don't know if our French Minister of Education lied, or if nobody talked to her about gender studies in US university. But the fact is, they say to us something that was a lie. Gender theory exists. And worse of that, in 2017, France changed his law. And in that law, published in 2017, the only thing you have to do to become a woman is just to say it to the judge. In fact, they say that medical conditions, surgery, medical diagnostic, medical treatment don't count. You have to perform women during 2 years to show some pictures, to come with some witnesses, but medical explanation don't count. Change your last name, then show picture, then say to the judge, that's it. And if the judge find you not enough feminine, not enough masculine, he doesn't have the right to say you know. This is the law in France since 2017. There were no debates, nothing. And I don't think that people are aware about that in France too. So we have the same crazy law as Canada and England and USA, and nobody is aware about that. So this is the issue in France. This is we were gaslights since 2014, and we have the same issue as any country in this world now. And in my area, French Guiana, we have a culture, a particular culture. We have my country is a place where there was slavery, colonialism. Next, we have an administration of prison. We have famous convicts in French Guyanese prison were on islands. Papillon live here. If you don't know Papillon, you can see a movie with Richard Dreyfuss. We have Amazonia rainforest, etc. We have a lot of ethnic, very different ethnic. We have 12 official language, 6 Native American, 4 autochthon, black autochthon people. We were slaves and we fly slavery and create their own village. They free themselves. We have a lot of culture, Asian culture, Hmong people who have to be saved by France and USA, and they send Hmong people in French Guiana. So we are very multicultural, you know. And in my country, French Guiana, we have a lot of problem with women safety. In 2014, Human Rights League came and made some studies, and they discovered that in my area, regarding to the population, we have the highest score of rape on minor, prostitution of minor, teen pregnancy. We have a lot of illegal immigration because people from Colombia, Santo Domingo, Haiti, Brazil, Suriname come here to find some better place to live, but there is a high score of poverty, so a lot of forced prostitution too. We have drugs problem. A lot of women can use their vagina. They want to carry drugs in France. We are like a door to Europe, you know. And some prison in France are full with French Guiana women, and they can die. They can die because of that. So we have all that stuff, but we don't have that much help, you know. We don't have so much place to protect women from domestic violence. We don't have so much place to protect children from abuse, you know. So we have a lot of problem. A lot of girl. As a teacher, I met a girl. We didn't know what period is. They have that period. They don't know what is it. They are believe in. They were dying because they have blood in between their legs. We have a lot of issue, and then you have these crazy things that say, no, you're not a woman because of that body. So there is too much ignorance to teach that crazy thing, you know. What I believe, in my opinion, the next slide, why gender identity can't work here in French Guiana? Because of our culture. A lot of Native American culture or autochthon culture are matrilineal. They are matrilineal because your name comes from your mother. And as I'm Creole, and Creole culture are matrifocal. Our mother is very important in our life, and nobody believes that your mother is not the people who carry you and in her belly. This is nonsense. I can't see anybody call her mother a cherished owner or something like that. So our culture are very strong. We have a lot of associations who celebrate womanhood. And we have other stuff in French Guiana too, and I linked that to non-binary illusion, you know. We have Carnival, and in Carnival in French Guiana, each year during 2 months, people have to play with gender stereotypes. In that picture, you can see a lot of people with dress or with very sexy clothes. They are all men, and we are playing with that. And women have to dress like men, and we have to caricature ourselves and to make fun of others. You don't have to become a beautiful woman. No, you have to become the most ugly, nasty woman as possible. And we do the same with men, you know. And among us, we have real trans people, and real trans people are people we are living like that every year, all the year, and nobody sees them as women. We are see them as in between. You are a man, but you like to wear women clothes. You like to live like that. Okay, we have homophobia here, but generally people let you live as you want. Who cares, you know? But nobody sees them as real women. Who are calling them ladies, man, monsieur, madame, or something like that. So I can can't work when people who don't change anything in their life are claiming, I want people call me Madame or Mrs. Excuse me, each year I play with like you just for fun. So this is nonsense. Gender identity works already because of French law. We have to respect that. And we already have some trans people. I don't know if we have some non-binary, but anyway. 2, social media works a lot here as there is no frontier. 3, it's easy to get some surgery in Brazil because you just have to cross the river and you are in Brazil. And aesthetic surgery works a lot, but aesthetic surgery for some people works a lot too. In France, they create a law some weeks ago to allow trans women to compete against women. Yes, in France too. And we have a lot of brainwashing in French media. This is insane, but they are doing that because the law is already done. So we have this children, this boy, his name is Lily now, he's 8 years old. And during this show, his mother was saying, yes, I was so worried because at 3 years old, she said to me, I want to die. At 3 years old? Seriously? Then she said, oh, I feel so relieved because at 5, she said to me, I want to cut my penis. What mother can be relieved when your child is saying that to you? I want to cut my penis. Then she cried, oh, it was hard, etc., etc. And then some people in the show ask her, what does it feel to feel a girl? And this little boy say, it's hard to say. That's it. We have no answer. We are still waiting the answer. What does it feel to feel girl? Girl? We don't know. But they are in every show. Every day you have something about trans children, trans people, trans, etc. I have some hope. Our French Minister of Sport is not that agree. I already talked to a French deputy who believe me, and we're thinking about signing the WHRC, but I don't know if he will do it. The more they show, the more people open their eyes, above all in France, because of what happened in 2014, because they lied to us. So how can they ask us to believe them now? And in my country, I hope our culture will strong enough with our old goddess like Mami Wata and Yemanja to fight against that craziness.